The autumn sun cast its golden rays through the living room windows, where Juliana's family gathered for the reading of Philip's will. The lawyer, a grey-haired man with serious features, cleared his throat before beginning to read the patriarch's last words. Juliana, seated next to her husband David, felt a tightness in her chest, a mixture of anxiety and fear. Her eyes briefly met those of Gabriel, her 18-year-old son, who seemed oblivious to the tension hanging in the air. David, in turn, maintained a solemn expression, although his eyes betrayed the pain of the recent loss. The lawyer's words echoed through the room, distributing Philip's assets among his loved ones. Juliana barely listened, lost in her own memories. Memories of stolen moments, of secrets buried long ago. It was then that the lawyer's voice took on a more serious tone, bringing Juliana back to the present.
And lastly, a letter left by Phillip to be read to all present.
The lawyer opened the envelope and began to read, his voice firm and clear.
My dear family, if this letter is being read, it means that I am no longer among you. There is a secret that I've kept for many years, a burden that I can no longer carry. Gabriel, my beloved grandson, is actually my biological son, the result of an affair I had with Juliana 19 years ago. I know that this revelation will bring pain and confusion, but I cannot leave this world without the truth being known. Juliana, I hope that one day you can forgive me for not being strong enough to claim our son. David, you have been a wonderful father to Gabriel, and I know that you will continue to be regardless of the blood that runs through his veins. Gabriel, my son, know that I have always loved you and been proud of the man you have become. I hope that you can find it in your heart to forgive your mother and me for the mistakes we made. With love, Philip.
A deathly silence took hold of the room. Juliana felt the world spinning around her, the weight of nearly 2 decades of secrets finally coming to light. She looked at David, expecting to find anger and betrayal in his eyes, but all she saw was confusion and pain. Gabriel, in turn, seemed lost, as if the ground had been pulled out from under his feet. He looked at Juliana, seeking answers, but she had none to offer, at least, not yet. The truth, like a relentless wave, had finally reached the shore, and it was up to each of them to find a way to deal with the consequences. Juliana knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but she also knew that she could no longer live in the shadow of her lies. The time for truth had come. Juliana and David's wedding album lay open on the table, the photos capturing the essence of a day that seemed to belong to another life. In the images, Juliana radiated happiness, her smile so wide that it seemed to illuminate the photograph itself. David, elegant in his suit, looked at his bride as if she were the only woman in the world. That spring day, nearly 20 years ago, marked the beginning of a new journey for the young couple. They exchanged vows before family and friends, promising eternal love and fidelity. Philip, David's father, was there, his charming smile and eyes shining with pride for his son. Philip had always been a constant presence in Juliana and David's life. Widowed for many years, he found comfort in the company of his son and daughter-in-law. Juliana admired him, his confident demeanor, his sharp intellect, the way he could captivate an entire room with his stories and jokes. In the early years of marriage, Juliana and David built a life together, grounded in love and complicity. They bought a cozy house in a quiet neighborhood, decorated it with carefully chosen furniture, and filled it with laughter and plans for the future. Philip was a frequent visitor, always bringing gifts and stories from his travels. He had a special affection for Juliana, praising her intelligence and beauty, making her feel valued in a way that she didn't always find in David, who was so focused on his rising career. As time passed, Juliana began to notice subtle changes in her relationship with Phillip. The glances they exchanged seemed to linger a little longer. The accidental touches sent shivers down her skin. She found herself longing for his visits, laughing a little louder at his jokes, dressing with more care when she knew he would be present. Juliana tried to ignore these feelings, attributing them to a passing need, a desire for validation. After all, she loved David, and they were building a life together. But every time Phillip looked at her with those intense eyes, every time he made her feel seen and desired, Juliana felt her defenses weaken. It was on an autumn afternoon, while David was away on a business trip, that Juliana and Phillip found themselves alone in her house. They talked for hours, laughing and sharing secrets, the tension between them growing with each minute. When Phillip leaned in to kiss her, Juliana knew she should pull away, that she should put an end to it before it was too late. But she didn't. At that moment, enveloped by the warmth of Phillip's large hands on her face and the intensity of his desire, Juliana gave in to temptation, crossing a line that could never be undone. She didn't know it yet, but that kiss would mark the beginning of the end of everything she knew and loved. She pulled away and clung to the obsessive thought that it had been just a kiss and nothing more. However, the wedding album photos seemed to silently observe her, frozen witnesses of a time of innocence and promises. A time that, without her knowing, was about to shatter under the weight of her choices. After the kiss that shook her world, Juliana found herself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She felt guilty for betraying David, but at the same time, she couldn't deny the overwhelming attraction she felt for Phillip. Determined to bury that moment of weakness, Juliana launched into a desperate attempt to avoid Phillip and focus on her marriage. However, fate seemed to have other plans. David, increasingly consumed by his work, began to spend more time at the office, leaving Juliana alone with her thoughts and forbidden desires. And Phillip, ever present, took every opportunity to get closer to her. He would show up at Juliana's house with innocent excuses, to help with a plumbing problem, to bring a recipe he had promised. But each visit was permeated by a growing tension, by lingering glances and subtle touches that left Juliana with a racing heart and skin on fire. Juliana fought against her attraction to Phillip, repeating to herself that he was her husband's father, that what they felt was wrong and destructive. She tried to keep herself busy, immersing herself in charity projects and outings with friends. But whenever she was alone, her thoughts returned to Phillip and the way he made her feel alive and desired. One day, during a rainy afternoon, Phillip showed up at Juliana's house without warning. David was away on a business trip, and Juliana found herself alone with Phillip, the tension between them almost palpable. They talked about trivial matters, but every word seemed laden with hidden meaning. Every glance felt like a caress. As the rain worsened, Phillip insisted on staying until the storm passed. They opened a bottle of wine and sat by the fireplace, the heat of the fire and the alcohol warming their bodies and lowering their inhibitions. Phillip moved closer to Juliana, his fingers tracing the curve of her face with a tenderness that left her breathless.
Juliana, I know this is wrong, but I can't help what I feel for you. You're the most incredible woman I've ever met.
Juliana closed her eyes, her body trembling with desire and fear. She knew she should push Phillip away, that she should be faithful to David and the vows she had made. But at that moment, with the rain falling outside and the heat of Philip's body so close, she found herself unable to resist. When Philip's lips met hers, Juliana surrendered completely to the passion that consumed her. They kissed with a desperation born of months of tension and repressed desire, their hands exploring each other's bodies with feverish urgency. That afternoon, in Philip's arms, Juliana allowed herself to forget everything: her marriage, her obligations, the devastating consequences her actions would have. She gave herself over to the moment, losing herself in the overwhelming sensations Philip awakened in her body and heart. But even as she surrendered to passion, Juliana knew she had crossed a line that could not be undone. She had betrayed David irreversibly, and now she would have to deal with the consequences of her choices. And the most terrible of those consequences was the fact that despite the weight of guilt and remorse, Juliana couldn't bring herself to regret it completely. Because in Philip's arms, she felt truly alive, more than the many words and plans she still made with David could ever make her feel. After that rainy afternoon, Juliana and Philip found themselves caught in an intense and inexplicable affair. They took advantage of every moment alone, giving in to ardent kisses and desperate caresses, even without understanding what drove them to such behavior. Secret meetings became frequent, in discreet hotels, on walks through the city, anywhere they could be together without being discovered. Juliana found herself consumed by a mixture of overwhelming desire and guilt. Every moment in Philip's arms was an explosion of uncontrollable passion, but as soon as they parted, the reality of her actions hit her with devastating force. The most disconcerting thing was that her marriage to David was far from unhappy. When they were together, their relationship was great. They desired each other, made plans for the future, and loved each other deeply. This made Juliana's desperate surrender to her father-in-law even more inexplicable. As Juliana struggled with her internal conflict, David began to notice subtle changes in her behavior. She was distant, distracted, always with her head somewhere else. He tried to convince himself that it was just work stress or some passing concern, as there was no reason to suspect problems in their seemingly solid and loving marriage. David's doubts were temporarily set aside when the family decided to spend Christmas at a beach house. Juliana, David, Philip, and David's siblings and in-laws gathered to celebrate the holidays in a relaxing and welcoming environment. But for Juliana and Philip, the trip was both torture and temptation. They were forced to be close to each other all the time, to sit side by side during meals, to participate in family activities as if nothing was happening. Every brush of hands, every lingering glance was agony, a reminder of the inexplicable desire that consumed them. One day, while Juliana was in the kitchen preparing lunch, Philip approached from behind and brushed his body against hers. Juliana felt a shiver run down her spine, her body reacting instantly to his touch. She closed her eyes, fighting against the overwhelming desire to give in right there, in the house full of family members. But before they could go any further, they spotted one of Philip's sons, Juliana's brother-in-law, approaching the house through the window. They quickly separated, pretending to be busy with their tasks. The moment of passion was interrupted, but the tension between them remained, palpable and suffocating. Philip, in turn, was confused by his attraction to Juliana. It wasn't love, he knew that. It was something more primitive, more visceral, an inexplicable need to possess her, to mark her skin and her heart. He hated himself for desiring his son's wife, especially knowing how much David loved and was happy with Juliana. Guilt ate away at him, but he couldn't control the overwhelming passion he felt for her. Juliana also couldn't understand what led her to surrender to Phillip. Her marriage to David was happy, full of love and complicity. They had a special connection, an undeniable chemistry. So why did she feel so irresistibly drawn to her father-in-law? It was an irrational desire, an inexplicable need that consumed her, making her feel guilty not only for betraying her marriage vows, but also for hurting the man she genuinely loved. And so, even amidst the joy of a family Christmas, Juliana and Phillip found themselves caught in a web of forbidden desire and corrosive guilt. They couldn't process or understand what was happening to them, but they knew their affair couldn't continue without devastating consequences. Each day at the beach house was torture and temptation, a constant reminder of the inexplicable desire that consumed them, threatening to destroy not only Juliana's relationship with David, but also the emotional integrity of everyone involved. And the more they tried to resist, the stronger the irrational attraction that dominated them became, leading them to question everything they believed about themselves and about love. Upon returning from the Christmas trip, Juliana was determined to put an end to her affair with Phillip. The guilt and confusion she felt were becoming unbearable, and she knew she needed to walk away before causing irreparable damage to her marriage and family. With a heavy heart, Juliana sought out Phillip for a serious conversation. They met in a park, away from prying eyes, and she gathered all the courage she had to speak. With her voice trembling, she said,
"Phillip, we need to stop this. What we're doing is wrong. I love David, and I can't keep betraying him like this."
Phillip sighed, running his hand over his tired face. He knew Juliana was right, but the idea of being away from her was too painful to bear. With his voice heavy with emotion, he confessed,
I know, Juliana, but I can't help what I feel for you. It's stronger than me.
Juliana felt tears burning her eyes.
"I don't understand what's happening between us either, Phillip, but we need to be strong. For everyone's sake, we need to walk away."
They hugged one last time, savouring the warmth and comfort of each other's arms. Then, with one last parting glance, they separated, promising never to meet alone again. In the weeks that followed, Juliana tried to focus on her marriage and forget about Phillip. She dedicated herself to David, making plans for the future and rekindling the passion between them. For a while, it seemed like everything would return to normal. But then, a terrifying suspicion began to grow in Juliana's mind. She started feeling morning sickness and dizziness, and an overwhelming fear took hold of her. With trembling hands, she bought a pregnancy test, but didn't have the courage to take it immediately. For days, the test remained hidden in Juliana's drawer, like a ticking time bomb ready to explode. She tried to ignore the symptoms, convincing herself that it was just stress or some passing indisposition. But deep down, she knew she was only delaying the inevitable. Finally, on a cold and grey morning, Juliana gathered all her courage and took the test. When the positive result appeared, she felt her world crumble around her. She was pregnant, and panic took over her being. Desperate, Juliana began to redo her calculations dozens of times, trying to find some flaw in her logic. She analysed every encounter with David, every moment of intimacy, desperately searching for an alternative explanation for her pregnancy. But there was no denying the overwhelming truth. The baby could only be Phillip's. The realization hit Juliana like a punch to the stomach. She found herself trapped in a nightmare from which she could not escape. How could she explain this to David? How could she live with the guilt of having gotten pregnant by her father-in-law? The idea of seeing the disappointment and pain in David's eyes was unbearable. Amidst the whirlwind of emotions, Juliana made a desperate decision. She decided to keep the pregnancy a secret from Phillip and pretend that the child was David's. It was the only way to protect her marriage and prevent the truth from destroying everything she loved. The following months were a torment for Juliana. She carried not only the weight of her growing belly, but also the crushing burden of her secret. Every smile from David, every plan he made for the baby's future, was like a stab to her heart. She felt like an imposter, a traitor, but saw no other way out. When little Gabriel was born, David welcomed him with love and adoration, not knowing that he might not be the child's true father. Juliana watched the scene with a mixture of relief and remorse, knowing that her secret could destroy everyone's happiness. But she was determined to take her secret to the grave. After all, what David didn't know couldn't hurt him. And so, Juliana dedicated herself to being the best mother and wife possible, burying her past with Phillip and praying that the truth would never come to light. What she didn't know was that secrets have the power to corrode the soul, and that the truth, no matter how painful, always finds a way to be revealed. And when that happened, the consequences would be devastating for everyone involved in this web of lies and betrayal. The years passed, and Juliana found herself trapped in a web of lies that she herself had woven. Day after day, she played the role of dedicated wife and loving mother, trying to bury the past and pretend that everything was fine. But the truth was like an ever-present ghost, haunting every moment of her life. David was a wonderful father to Gabriel, loving him unconditionally and dedicating himself to every stage of his growth. He was always present, from the first steps to school performances, filling the house with joy and laughter. Juliana watched their relationship with a mixture of tenderness and guilt, knowing that her family's happiness was built on a foundation of lies. Phillip, in turn, maintained a close relationship with Gabriel, acting as a loving and attentive grandfather. He was always around, spoiling the boy with gifts and attention, not knowing that he was creating bonds with his own son. Juliana lived in a constant state of alert, fearing that some gesture or word might betray her secret. As Gabriel grew, Juliana couldn't help but notice the similarities between him and Phillip. The boy had the same intense eyes, the same captivating smile, and even some mannerisms that reminded her of her father-in-law. Each similarity was like a stab to Juliana's heart, constantly reminding her of her mistake and the lie she was living. Guilt ate away at Juliana from the inside, consuming her day after day. She lived with the constant fear of being discovered, imagining the devastating consequences it would bring to her family. She wondered how David would react if he knew the truth, if he would be able to forgive her for her unforgivable betrayal. And Phillip, how would he cope if he knew that Gabriel was his son? The years turned into a silent torture for Juliana, every moment of happiness tainted by the shadow of her secret. She clung desperately to her facade, praying that she could keep the truth buried forever. But fate had other plans. One fateful afternoon, while Phillip was playing with Gabriel in the garden, the boy got hurt and started crying. Without thinking, Phillip took him in his arms and comforted him with soft words, exactly as he would with a son. At that moment, something clicked in Phillip's mind, and he saw Gabriel in a new light. Stunned by the sudden suspicion, Phillip confronted Juliana that very night, demanding the truth. Cornered and exhausted from lying, Juliana finally broke down, confessing through tears that Gabriel was Philip's son, the result of their forbidden affair. The shock and betrayal etched on Philip's face were indescribable. He felt deceived, used, and betrayed in the worst possible way. The revelation shook the foundations of his life, throwing him into a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Philip demanded that Juliana keep the secret, fearing the consequences that the truth would bring to the family. He couldn't bear the thought of losing the love and respect of his son David, and decided to carry the burden of that knowledge alone. From that moment on, Philip and Juliana found themselves united by a dark secret, sharing the guilt and fear of being discovered. They maintained the facade, pretending that nothing had changed, while inside they were shattered. Even in joyful moments, a pang in the heart was constant, and a dark cloud loomed over their heads relentlessly. Philip began to see Gabriel with different eyes, observing every gesture and expression of the boy, looking for traces of himself. He wondered what it would be like to assume his role as a father, but knew that it would destroy his family. So, he contented himself with being the loving grandfather, keeping his distance and stifling his feelings. Juliana, in turn, was tormented by guilt and fear. She feared that David would discover the truth and hate her forever. Every moment beside her husband was torture, knowing that she was living a lie and betraying his trust. The years passed, and the family moved on, unaware of the secret that was corroding Philip and Juliana from the inside. They maintained the facade, living each day as if they were in a theatre, playing roles that didn't belong to them. The silence in the room was deafening after the reading of Philip's will. The lawyer's words echoed in the minds of everyone present, revealing a truth that had been buried for years. Juliana, David, and Gabriel were paralyzed, each processing the information differently. Juliana felt the crushing weight of guilt and fear finally descending upon her. All the years of lies and secrets were now exposed, and she knew she would have to face the consequences of her choices. Her body trembled, and silent tears streamed down her face as she tried to find the right words to explain the inexplicable. David, in turn, was in shock. He looked at Juliana with a mixture of disbelief, anger, and betrayal etched on his face. His world had collapsed in a matter of seconds, and he felt deceived and betrayed by the woman he loved and the man he considered his father. The pain of betrayal was so intense that he could barely breathe, feeling suffocated by the truth that had been revealed. Gabriel, the young man at the center of all this turmoil, was stunned. His mind tried to process the information that the man he had always called grandfather was in fact his biological father. He looked at Juliana and David, seeking answers, but only found pain and confusion in their eyes. Gabriel felt lost, as if the ground had been pulled out from under his feet, and he no longer knew who to trust. The lawyer, sensing the palpable tension in the room, discreetly withdrew, leaving the family alone to deal with the consequences of that bombshell revelation. As soon as the door closed, David abruptly stood up, facing Juliana with eyes full of fury and pain. His voice trembled when he finally spoke.
How could you do this to me, Juliana? How could you lie to me all these years, making me believe that Gabriel was my son?
Juliana, between sobs, tried to explain.
I'm sorry, David. I was afraid of losing you, of destroying our family. I thought I was doing the right thing, protecting all of us from the truth.
David laughed bitterly.
Protecting? You betrayed us, Juliana. You betrayed me. You betrayed our marriage, and you betrayed the trust I had in you. How can I trust anything you say now?
Gabriel, seeing his parents arguing, felt a wave of conflicting emotions. He wanted answers, wanted to understand how his life had been turned upside down in an instant.
Why, Mom? Why did you lie to me? Why did you make me believe that Grandpa Phillip was just my grandfather, when in fact he was my father?
Juliana turned to Gabriel, her eyes filled with tears and regret.
Gabriel, my son, I never wanted to hurt you. I love you more than anything in this world. I made a mistake. And I spent all these years trying to protect you from the truth.
Protect him. Or protect yourself, Juliana. You deceived us, made us live a lie. How do you expect us to forgive you?
Juliana lowered her head, feeling the weight of her choices. She knew she would have a long road ahead to repair the damage she had caused, if that was even possible. Gabriel, feeling suffocated by the tension in the room, abruptly stood up.
I need some time to process all of this. I can't stay here right now.
He left the room, leaving Juliana and David alone with their accusations, questions, and the harsh reality that their family had been built on a foundation of lies. Juliana knew that this was just the beginning of a long journey of confrontations, explanations, and attempts at reparation. She would have to face the consequences of her choices and fight to rebuild the trust she had destroyed. Nothing would be the same as before, and the family would have to find a way to move forward, even with the wounds exposed and the pain of betrayal still pulsing in their hearts. The revealing present had arrived, and now it was up to each of them to decide how to deal with the truth and find a new path amidst the rubble of their lives. After the initial confrontation, Juliana, David, and Gabriel met again, this time with the determination to clarify the whole truth. Tension hung in the air, but everyone knew they had to face the secrets that had been exposed. Juliana, with a trembling voice and eyes filled with tears, began to tell her story. She revealed how she had become involved with Phillip in a moment of weakness, when her marriage to David was going through difficulties. The affair had been brief but intense and had resulted in Gabriel's unexpected pregnancy. David listened to every word with a mixture of pain and disbelief. Each revelation was like a stab to his heart, destroying the trust he had placed in his wife and his father. He felt betrayed, deceived, and used, as if the last years of his life had been a farce. Juliana explained how she had decided to hide the truth, fearing the consequences that the revelation would bring to her family. She had convinced Phillip to keep the secret, claiming that it would be better for everyone if David believed he was Gabriel's biological father. David, his voice choked with emotion, questioned Juliana.
How could you do this to me, Juliana? How could you make me believe that Gabriel was my son, when in fact he was the result of your affair with my own father?
Juliana, between sobs, tried to explain.
I was afraid, David. Afraid of losing you, of destroying our family. I thought I was doing the right thing, protecting all of us from the truth. But I know I was wrong, and there are no excuses for what I did.
Gabriel then finally spoke again. His voice was heavy with pain and confusion.
My whole life has been a lie. The man I called grandfather was actually my father. And the man I called father, he raised me without knowing the truth.
David felt a wave of conflicting emotions upon hearing Gabriel's words. On one hand, he felt betrayed for having raised another man's child without knowing it. On the other hand, his love for Gabriel was unwavering, regardless of blood ties. David tried to comfort the young man.
Gabriel, I know none of this is easy for you, but I want you to know that regardless of everything, you will always be my son. I love you, and I will always be here for you.
Gabriel, however, was struggling with his own identity. He questioned everything he believed about his family and about himself.
I don't know who I am anymore. My entire life was built on a lie. How can I trust anything now?
Juliana, realizing her son's pain, tried to approach him.
Gabriel, I know I was wrong and that nothing I say can change that. But I want you to know that my love for you is real. You are my son, and that will never change.
David, still dealing with the betrayal, knew he needed to be strong for his family.
We will get through this together, Gabriel. It will take time, but we will find a way to move forward.
The truth had been exposed, and now it was up to each of them to deal with the consequences. Juliana would have to face the guilt and regret for what she had done. David would need to decide if he wanted to find a way to forgive and rebuild trust in his marriage. And Gabriel would have to rediscover his identity and his place in that family marked by secrets. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with emotional challenges and deep scars. Now, it was time to face reality and fight for a better future, even if it meant treading an unknown and painful path. The revelation of Gabriel's true paternity had a seismic impact on the family and the society around them. The news spread quickly, and soon everyone was aware of the scandal that had shaken the respected family. Juliana faced the relentless judgment of society. Looks of contempt and malicious whispers followed her wherever she went. She became the center of gossip and speculation, with people questioning her character and morals. Shame and guilt consumed her, and she found herself isolated and rejected by those she once called friends. David, in turn, was torn between the pain of betrayal and the love he still felt for Juliana. He wondered if he would be able to forgive and rebuild his marriage after such a devastating revelation. Every interaction with Juliana was fraught with tension and resentment, and he found himself questioning whether the love they shared would be strong enough to overcome that ordeal. Gabriel, the young man at the center of the hurricane, struggled with his own choices and conflicting emotions. He felt betrayed by his mother, whom he had always trusted and loved unconditionally. The revelation that she had lied to him throughout his entire life deeply shook their relationship. At the same time, Gabriel found himself dealing with the memory of his biological father, Phillip. He wondered what his life would have been like if he had grown up knowing the truth, if he would have had the chance to know and love his father in a different way. Guilt and confusion consumed him, and he found himself torn between loyalty to the mother who raised him and curiosity about the father he never knew as a father. For months, with the tension always high and palpable, as if the air was charged with electricity, David and Juliana had the same conversation many times, in various versions. He paced back and forth, his heavy footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. Juliana sat on the couch or a chair, her eyes red and swollen from crying, her hands trembling as she tried to control the emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. David exploded, his voice filled with pain and anger.
How could you do this to me? To our family? All these years, living a lie, raising a child that isn't mine.
Juliana shrank from the harsh words, tears streaming down her face.
I'm sorry, David. I never meant to hurt you. I was scared, confused. Phillip was my past, and you were my future. I chose you.
Chose me. You chose to lie to me, Juliana. You betrayed me in the worst possible way. How can I trust you again? How can I look at Gabriel without being reminded that he is the living proof of your betrayal?
Juliana sobbed, felt dizzy, her body sometimes shaking with the force of her emotions. Other times, seeming on the verge of fainting.
I know I was wrong, David. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't regret my choices, but Gabriel, he is our son regardless of biology. You loved and raised him as your own. That can't be erased.
David ran his hands over his face, exhaustion and pain evident in his eyes.
I don't know if I can do this, Juliana. I don't know if I can forgive you. The trust we had, it's been destroyed. Maybe it's better if we go our separate ways.
Juliana stood up from the couch, taking a hesitant step towards David.
Please, David, don't give up on us. Don't give up on our family. We can overcome this together. I know it will take time, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild our relationship.
I need time, Juliana. I need space to think, to heal. I can't promise anything right now. I can't pretend everything is okay when my whole world has fallen apart.
I understand, David. I respect your decision, but please don't forget the love we have, the family we built together. Don't let a mistake from the past destroy everything we have.
I don't know what the future holds for us, Juliana, but I know that regardless of what happens, we need to do what's best for our children. They don't deserve to suffer because of your mistakes.
Juliana sometimes agreed, overcome by exhaustion, humiliation, and guilt. Other times she was inconsolable, wiping away tears with the back of her hands.
Our children will always be our priority, David. We will do whatever it takes to protect them and ensure they feel loved and secure.
David nodded, a heavy silence hanging between them. The unspoken words, the repressed emotions filled the space, suffocating them. They knew they had a long road ahead, filled with difficult choices and painful consequences. But at that moment, the only certainty they had was that their lives would never be the same again. The revelation had left deep scars, and it was up to them to decide if they were willing to face the journey of healing together, or if they would go their separate ways, carrying the wounds of the past with them. Gabriel, in turn, couldn't find a way to relate to his mother after the betrayal. He oscillated between anger, contempt, and brief moments of understanding, knowing that, despite everything, she was still the woman who loved him and raised him with dedication. He also had to deal with the memory of Phillip, who had been a kind of hero to him until then, and now had his memory degraded by disloyalty to his son and family. After much reflection and painful discussions, David and Juliana decided that the best choice for them would be separation. The resentment and remorse were too deep to be overcome quickly, and both needed time and space to heal their emotional wounds. The separation was turbulent, marked by intense fights and moments of forced diplomacy. They tried to maintain a facade of civility for the sake of Gabriel and their daughters, but the tension was palpable. David moved to a nearby apartment, while Juliana remained in the family home with the children. Months turned into years, and the distance between David and Juliana seemed to grow with each passing day. They communicated only when necessary, dealing with practical issues related to the children and the division of assets. The love that had once united them seemed to have been lost amid the pain and betrayal. However, when the time came to sign the divorce papers, David hesitated. He found himself unable to put a definitive end to his marriage. Despite all the hurt and resentment, he still harbored feelings for Juliana and couldn't imagine his life without her. Surprising everyone, David proposed that they move back in together, but made it clear that their coexistence would not be exactly conjugal. He needed time to fully forgive and rebuild trust. Juliana, tired of loneliness and the weight of guilt, accepted the proposal, eager for a chance to start over. Living under the same roof was initially uncomfortable and strange. They lived like two strangers, sharing the same space but avoiding any emotional intimacy. David focused on his work and on being a present father to Gabriel and their daughters, while Juliana struggled to find her place in that new family dynamic. As time passed, David began to reflect on his own role in the breakdown of the marriage. He realized that he had not been the most present and attentive husband in the early years, often prioritizing his career over family. He also admitted to himself that he had been unfaithful on more than one occasion, seeking solace in the arms of other women when he felt lonely and misunderstood. This self-reflection was painful but necessary for David to move forward. He dedicated himself to being a more present and affectionate father, building stronger bonds with Gabriel and his daughters. As for Gabriel, David made it clear that he loved him unconditionally and that nothing would change the fact that he was his son, regardless of biology. If Phillip had died leaving a helpless child behind, David would have cared for that sibling as if he were his own son. He relied on this idea to combat the urges to sever his paternal ties with Gabriel, who, after all, was not to blame for anything. The journey of healing was not linear. There were moments when painful memories resurfaced, bringing with them bitterness and mistrust. On those days, they would drift apart, seeking refuge in their own reflections and personal spaces. David devoted himself to work, immersing himself in challenging projects that kept him busy late into the night. Juliana, in turn, found solace in writing, transforming her emotions into words that filled the pages of a secret diary. It took a decade for David and Juliana to find a new balance in their relationship. The wounds of the past finally began to heal, but the scars would remain forever, reminding them of the fragility of the bonds that united them. On an autumn day, as they walked through the park where they used to take their children when they were young, David and Juliana sat on a bench, watching the yellowed leaves falling from the trees. A comfortable silence hung between them, punctuated only by the rustling of leaves in the wind.
Do you think we made the right choice, staying together despite everything?
Juliana asked suddenly, her eyes fixed on a distant point on the horizon. David pondered for a moment, feeling the weight of the years and the decisions they had made.
I don't know if there is a right or wrong choice. I think we did the best we could, given the circumstances. But there will always be that doubt, that what if.
Juliana nodded, understanding the feeling. They had chosen to forgive, rebuild, and move forward, but it didn't erase the pain they had caused each other. Trust, once broken, would never be the same again.
I wonder what it would have been like if we'd gone our separate ways, if we would have found happiness in another way, with other people.
David held Juliana's hand, feeling the familiar texture of her skin.
Maybe, but we might also have regretted not fighting for what we had, not giving a chance to forgiveness and rebuilding.
They sat there, hand in hand, contemplating life's uncertainties and the choices they had made. They knew they would never have all the answers, that there would always be room for doubt and regret. But they also knew that they had chosen to face their demons together, day after day, and that, in itself, was a form of love. And so, as the sun set and the shadows lengthened across the park, David and Juliana remained seated, united by a past full of scars and an uncertain future. yet still shared. Because in the end, perhaps love is not about absolute certainties, but about the courage to face doubts and challenges, hand in hand, until the very end.
Hey there, Unraveling Ties family. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. I hope it touched your heart, made you think, or even inspired you in some way. We would love to hear your thoughts and feelings about this story. Don't be shy. Leave a comment below and share your perspective with our community. Your voice matters to us. If you enjoyed today's story and want to be a part of our journey as we unravel the complexities of human relationships, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss a new story. We're always eager to explore new angles and dive into the themes that resonate with you the most. So tell us, what kind of stories would you like to see in upcoming episodes? Your input helps us create content that you'll love. And hey, if today's story reminded you of a personal experience or a tale you'd like to share, we're all ears. Feel free to share your own stories in the comments. Who knows, your story might even inspire a future Unraveling Ties episode. Once again, thank you for being a part of the Unraveling Ties family. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Until next time, keep embracing the ties that bind us and never stop exploring the depths of the human heart. See you in the next video.